Welcome to Fantasy Football Today. It's a fun show that we have for you today because we're talking about a mock draft. It's our first mock draft following the NFL draft, and we're going to break it down for you right here over the next 60 minutes. I'm Jamie, that's Heath, that's Adam, that's Dave. We all took part in this mock draft, some of us a little bit more vested than others, and we had a lot of fun doing it. Let's take a look at the round one results, fellas, because it was very interesting once we got to the middle of the first round, as you see here. Probably chalk the first 6 picks: McCaffrey, Barkley, Elliott, Thomas, Cook, and Kamara. You could debate whether Michael Thomas should be higher than number 4 overall, but goes 4th here behind 3 very, very good running backs. And then we get to number 7 with a little bit of a questionable selection of Miles Sanders. We'll break that down. Followed by a bunch of receivers: Adams, Hill, Jones, Godwin, and then the top tight end, and Travis Kelce. So let's start with your pick at number 7, Dave. Dave had the number 7 selection, taking Miles Sanders over Davante Adams. Really?
Easy decision. And I would do it again if I had the chance. I think Miles Sanders could be on the cusp of a 1,500 total yard, double-digit touchdown year with 60 catches. He basically averaged that over his last 8 games last season when he was the de facto number 1 guy for Philadelphia in their run game. And I think he's going to continue to be that guy. They didn't draft another running back. They haven't signed another running back. Maybe they do, but it wouldn't worry me. He's a versatile running back. He's a great weapon out of the backfield. He's got good speed. He's the goal line guy. And here's where I had my aha moment, Jamie. They drafted so many speedy receivers, and I think that that's going to help take the top off of opposing defenses. The safeties can't crowd the line anymore, and it's going to open things up underneath, not just for Ertz, but certainly for Miles Sanders. I'm looking for running backs with that 1,500-yard double-digit touchdown potential. And Sanders, I think, is the last one that's got it in fantasy after all the other running backs that went off the board. I have no problem taking him at 7. He's better than Davante Adams, even in PPR.
Keith, how much do you hate that pick?
It's pretty terrible. Seems like Adam Azer made it. No, I just think you could make the argument for Miles Sanders as the next best running back. I couldn't take him over really the next 4 wide receivers. I'd rather have Travis Kelce. And I think Dave's projection, or it wasn't a projection, but what Dave said, like 1,500 total yards, 10 touchdowns, that seems doable. I just don't know that makes you a first-round pick. I expect Austin Eckler to have 1,500 yards and catch a lot more passes than Miles Sanders. I think Derrick Henry, if he plays 16 games, is probably going to have 400 or 500 more yards than that, and definitely more touchdowns than Sanders. So I'm fine with Sanders in the early second round now that they didn't take another running back. I still think he's going to share a little bit with Boston Scott. I don't want to argue too much about the running backs, but I just think those next 3 or 4 wide receivers are much, much safer than Sanders.
That's where I come out on it as well, but I'm going to let Adam break the tie between Dave and Heath. Adam, you've been banging the drum for Miles Sanders to be a top-tier running back, a first-round pick, but would you have taken him over those wide receivers?
I think I would have. Absolutely. I'm convinced. Let's do it, and I'll tell you why. You look at his last 6 games and you take out week 17, because if you look at you include week 17 in your last 8 games, whatever, well, he got hurt in week 17. So take that game out. His last 6 games after Jordan Howard got hurt, he was on pace for 1,700 yards and 10 touchdowns, included in that 67 catches. Tyreek Hill is probably going to catch like 80 passes. His career high was 87. That was when you had a 5,000-yard season with 50 touchdowns from Patrick Mahomes. So I don't think his catches are going to be that dissimilar from Tyreek Hill. I think 10 touchdowns is low for Miles Sanders. There's no reason why he can't have 12. He could have an Aaron Jones-like season. He could have one of those crazy 17 touchdown seasons. He's going to get all the goal line work. Miles Sanders is the next elite running back in fantasy. There's no doubt about it. Dave is right.
Okay, so take out all the games that Tyreek Hill missed, take out all the games that Davante Adams missed, take out all the games that all other players mixed, put those averages together. We'll see who had the better season between those wide receivers and Miles Sanders. He is a great running back. He should be a first-round pick. He should not go ahead of Davante Adams, in my opinion, and I get the last word on the subject. Let's go now to round 2, and we start to look at another crazy selection. This one was mine. I took the first rookie off the board, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, with the 3rd pick in round 2. But you see here, first pick goes to Austin Eckler. No surprise there. Cooper Kupp, probably a little bit of surprise at 14th overall. The second tight end in George Kittle. And then you see a lot of the usual suspects in round 2. Maybe a surprise that DeAndre Hopkins falls to the middle of round 2. Dave made that selection at 18th overall. You see Joe Mixon, Kenyon Drake, maybe they fell a little bit. Aaron Jones, get used to him falling because of the addition of A.J. Dillon. So let's talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm giddy for him. I think he's going to be a superstar. You said Miles Sanders, the next elite running back. I think you're right. I think Edwards-Helaire is also going to be the next elite running back for the Chiefs. So Adam, tell me why I'm crazy for taking the Chiefs' new toy.
As we are almost a week out from the draft, a week since the draft ended, at least the first round, I've come around on Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I don't think Damian Williams is quite as good as I thought he was, and I certainly don't think Damian Williams is built for a big workload, and I don't think he's ever going to get it. But I do think, at least in the beginning of the year, Damian Williams is going to get more carries than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I don't think they're going to just throw Edwards-Helaire in there as the featured running back. I think they will share, at least at the beginning of the season. So I think taking him over Nick Chubb, taking him over Joe Mixon, over Kenyon Drake was a mistake. I'm still going Aaron Jones, but I understand why in PPR you go Edwards-Helaire. He had 55 catches in college last year. That's crazy. Aaron Jones not going to be a huge factor in the passing game, I don't think. So I think you took him a little bit too early. I think about a round too early, quite frankly. I just don't think Damian Williams is going away right out of the gate.
All right, a round too early for Adam. What about you, Dave? When are you drafting the Chiefs' next stud?
I'm going to take him in round 3, but if you have to have him, if you truly believe that he's a 1,500-yard, double-digit touchdown guy, and if he gets that type of production, he's going to have way more than 60 catches, then you got to take him in round 2. And the hype train is really moving full speed ahead here, and he could really catch round 1 if by training camp Damian Williams is hurt and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is knowing what he knows what he's doing, and he looks great out there. I know that Andy Reid made the comparison to Brian Westbrook saying he's better. I look at him, I think he's better than Kareem Hunt was when Kareem Hunt came out of college a few years ago. And Kareem Hunt got a great opportunity, and he was a monster for fantasy. So if that's where Edwards-Helaire comes out, then you're taking him too late if it's round 2. Here's the last point I'll make. Running backs in Kansas City, since Andy Reid got there, it's been 7 years. They've averaged 116 targets per season. That's all the running backs. If Edwards-Helaire gets the volume necessary to be a big-time back, you're going to see him get close to 100 targets. That's crazy. It sounds crazy, but it's legit. It's possible that he gets that type of workload there. So I see where you're coming from. For now, I think he's a round 3 pick, but by the time we get to August, I might be taking him ahead of you, Jamie, in late round 1.
Since 2015, only 3 rookie running backs have seen over 100 targets. Those were 3 pretty special ones in Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara. If we're talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that category, you're going to be thrilled to take him no matter where you get him on draft day. Heath, compare him to some of those other guys. Adam brought it up. He would take some of these guys like Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones ahead of them. But talk about those guys that went in the second round. Chubb, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon. We'll put Austin Eckler on a different plane because we know how much you like him. But the guys that went after Edwards-Helaire, what do you think about that group of running backs?
I think they're all good second-round selections. I mean, the difference between them and Helaire is Edwards-Helaire, it's more likely they're going to score double-digit touchdowns. It's more likely they're going to be the first and second down back from the very beginning of the year than it is. And I would say, like, with Henry, he probably still has more upside. He could get hurt, but if he doesn't get hurt, there's no reason for us to expect anything other than 1,800 total yards and possibly as many as 15 touchdowns. So I think Henry probably has the most upside of the group. Going to be very interesting to see what type of impact A.J. Dillon has on Aaron Jones. We knew he was going to regress in terms of touchdowns. I still think he's likely to score 10 of them, though. I don't know that Dillon has as big of impact this year so much as it just means they're not giving Aaron Jones another contract next year. I still like Aaron Jones at the 2-3 turn.
Before we move on to that 2-3 turn, or get at least into round 3, I want to stop at, let me rephrase that. We're at the 2-3 turn because that's the player we're going to talk about next, the player that Heath took at the end of round 2, Juju Smith-Schuster. So if you watched our show on Tuesday, we were talking about wide receivers that had their stock up, wide receivers had their stock down. We couldn't get a hold of Dave when we were talking about the stock down wide receivers, but he had Juju Smith-Schuster as a guy that's seen his stock fall since the NFL draft, or at least this offseason. So Dave, why are you down on Juju? And then Heath, defend the pick because you took him at the end of the second round.
We know nothing about where Juju stands in this Steelers offense. I think we can assume that he would be the number 1 target and the top target getter, but we don't know if he can beat double teams. We don't know if he's going to be the red zone option now that they added Eric Ebron and Chase Claypool. Those are some pretty big targets for Ben Roethlisberger to chuck at. And by the way, we don't know how healthy Ben Roethlisberger is. It sounds like he's going to be ready for the season. But how effective will he be? He had significant elbow surgery that cost him pretty much all of 2019. We know the Steelers seem to be sour on Smith-Schuster. Good alliteration by me right there. I think you could see Juju see only a modest amount of targets, maybe in the 115 type range. He's disappointing at that point if you're taking him in round 2 or even early round 3. I'm probably not going to draft Juju in many leagues. I've got him as a round 4 pick in PPR.
All right, Heath, defend yourself.
Yeah, if Juju Smith-Schuster only gets 115 targets, then James Conner might be the number 1 running back in fantasy. This team is going to throw the ball 600 times. That's what they did when Ben Roethlisberger was last the starting quarterback. They changed things up last year because they didn't have a good quarterback. They do once again. And I love the fact that they added Chase Claypool to play outside, and Juju's going to slide into the slot where he's more fits just a little bit better. I expect him to lead this team in targets by a pretty fair margin. Wouldn't be surprised if he approaches 150. Once again, this is a player, very, very special talent. There's no question whether he's better than Deontay Johnson or Chase Claypool or, goodness gracious, Eric Ebron. Of course he's better than those guys. We were drafting him as a late first round, early second round pick, and just because of a bad season with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, we're not sure if he's worth a pick at the 2-3 turn. He's going to be a top 10 wide receiver this year.
Adam, break the tie. What do you like, Juju or staying away from Juju?
No, I like Juju there. I like him a lot. He had 166 targets 2 seasons ago with Ben Roethlisberger, and that was with Antonio Brown on the field. So I just don't see how Juju becomes a 115 target guy. 150, I think, seems pretty realistic, and upside of 180 targets. I think Heath and maybe Ben Gretsch were saying this last year. He could lead the league in targets with Ben Roethlisberger. I don't see why that can't be the case again. I agree with that, and I'm perfectly fine with Juju at the end of round 2.
I am as well. The one thing I will say about the Roethlisberger situation, we like to say a lot. Teams tell us about how they feel about certain positions, certain players. Steelers did not draft a quarterback, so they probably feel pretty comfortable that Roethlisberger going to make a return from that elbow injury. Let's move on now to round 3, and we saw a situation where a lot of good wide receivers were taken in this round. We'll take a look at the list here. You see guys like Tyler Lockett, Adam Thielen, Allen Robinson, Mike Evans falling into round 3, which may surprise a few people just given the fact that they got Tom Brady while they also got Rob Gronkowski, and we'll see if Brady and Evans can still connect at the same level that Jameis Winston and Mike Evans have the last several seasons. Kenny Golladay in this round, A.J. Brown in this round, and finally Amari Cooper. So Adam, when you look at this group, we spent a lot of time on our podcast on Wednesday morning. You can check that out wherever podcasts are found, our Fantasy Football Today podcast. You look at this group of guys, how excited are you, or maybe are you shying away from this cast of characters at the wide receiver position?
I love this group. I love it. I think Tyler Lockett, Ben Schrager's going to get mad at me for saying this. Bring it on, Ben. You took Tyler Lockett too early in a PPR league. I don't even think he's the best Seahawks wide receiver this year, but I know I'm in the minority there. I think Lockett's more of a late round 3, early round 4 guy as opposed to early round 3, but Adam Thielen, if he stays healthy, he could be a top 5 wide receiver. I wouldn't even be surprised if he's number 2 or 3, honestly. Mike Evans, he's Mike Evans. Come on, why is he falling? Allen Robinson is safe. He's a little bit boring in my opinion, but I think Nick Foles is going to be an upgrade for him if and when Foles wins that job. Amari Cooper's going too late. I'm sorry, 36 overall is too low for him. He should have gone ahead of some of those other wide receivers. A.J. Brown is so exciting, but he might be kind of like Kenny Golladay, who's also very exciting. Those guys might be 75 catch kind of guys, which limits their upside a little bit in PPR, but they're very, very good. A.J. Brown could be a total star. This is a great round for wide receivers, and it's a reason to seriously consider taking a running back with each of your first 2 picks.
Something you did by taking Ezekiel Elliott, Kenyon Drake, and then Adam Thielen in round 3. Heath, again, going back to your turn at the 2-3 turn, did you give any consideration to one of these wide receivers, or the value for Josh Jacobs was just too good?
Well, I did think about the wide receivers, but I just didn't like the idea of waiting until pick 48 to take my next running back. I thought there was going to be a big drop-off between Josh Jacobs and whoever was left. And that's true at wide receiver as well, but it just felt like the drop-off was going to be too big from Jacobs to the next running back.
All right, speaking of running backs, when we come back, we're going to take a look at the running backs who went in round 4. Some oldies, but could be some good ones when you look at Melvin Gordon, Todd Gurley, some of the guys that are heading to new teams, Gurley to the Falcons, and you also got Jonathan Taylor. We'll see where he mixes in. Stay right here next on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football. Today we're breaking down our latest 12-team PPR mock draft. Start 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a flex. It's the first draft we've done since the NFL draft, and I was fired up for this one. I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited talking about the results here. We're into round 4, and we're looking at some of the running backs that came off the board here, and it was really interesting to see when we start to get the rookies going. Clyde Edwards-Helaire already off the board. He was in round 2. But you see Jonathan Taylor at 40, the second rookie running back that was taken. He goes kind of in the mix of some veterans. Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon changing teams. Gurley to the Falcons, Gordon to the Broncos. And then Chris Carson at 42, guy that's coming off an injury for Seattle. You see the other receivers, some tight ends as well. So this is where we start to get into the second starting option, whether running back or wide receiver. And Dave, I want to ask you in terms of Taylor, by comparison to Gurley, Gordon, and Carson, is this the right spot for Taylor, knowing that he's going to have to still win the job for the Colts and beat out Marlon Mack?
It's not the right spot. And I'm not worried about him beating out Marlon Mack. I think eventually the cream rises to the top and Taylor will be that guy. But he still has to fend off Nyheim Hines on passing downs, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think Hines is going to have that role. And let's just say that Jonathan Taylor, who had a fumbling problem in college, fumbles within the first couple weeks of the season. Well, now he's in a timeshare with Marlon Mack. What if he fumbles in the preseason? Then he starts the year in the timeshare. I think it's a little too soon for Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor is one of the running backs in this year's draft class who I think has a much better chance of being amazing starting in 2021 and can be good in the first half of the season and then really good in the second half of the 2020 season. I think round 4 is a little too soon for Taylor.
I don't have a problem with him there, but you can certainly debate the receivers going ahead of him. Again, just looking at the format, and like you said, maybe he's not going to be as involved in the passing game. So Adam, when you look at those running backs, Gurley, Gordon, Taylor, Carson, the receivers that went after those guys, Calvin Ridley, Robert Woods, Odell Beckham, T.Y. Hilton, Cortland Sutton, A.J. Green, would you rather have those receivers or the running back?
I'd rather have those receivers than Jonathan Taylor. I think that is a huge reach for Jonathan Taylor. Over the last 5 seasons, there have been 2 round 2 running backs in the NFL draft that have gotten big work right away. They were TJ Yeldon and Dalvin Cook. That's it. So you basically, when you draft Jonathan Taylor, you need to ask yourself, in retrospect, where should I have drafted Miles Sanders last year? Because Miles Sanders was a league winner, but he was kind of useless for about half the season. And round 4 is not the answer.
All right, let me ask you, where would you have taken Miles Sanders last year?
Yeah.
Where would you have taken Miles Sanders last year?
Like the 6th round.
Knowing what you know right now.
Yeah, like maybe the 5th round, late. What's that?
I don't think you would have gotten him. If you're telling people that you would have gotten that guy by the end of the season, I don't think you would have gotten him in round 6 or round 5.
Well, there's some uncertainty, but I think, you can't just have a useless player on your team for half the year, and you might have that with Jonathan Taylor. So that's why I'd take Melvin Gordon and Todd Gurley ahead of him, to answer your original question, Jamie. And I'd take Melvin Gordon and Todd Gurley ahead of some of those receivers. I like Calvin Ridley better. I like Odell Beckham to have a bounce back, but this is a good range for them. I just think Taylor, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kind of go off subject there, but I just thought that was a really bad pick, at least a round too early.
Okay, so round 2. Heath, what about you? Where are you taking Jonathan Taylor?
I love Jonathan Taylor. I don't want to say anything bad about this pick, but I have to unfortunately mostly agree with Adam. I think of all the rookie running backs, he landed in a situation that's kind of like J.K. Dobbins, where I don't know that this year it's actually that great with both Mack and Hines. He is, I still believe, the most talented back in this class. I think he will at some point take over as the lead back, but probably not get the work in the passing game that Sanders got last year. That might be the difference between Taylor's second half back breakout and what we saw from Sanders. So I'm not taking him before round 6, which means I'm probably not getting him.
Okay, so let's go now to round 5, where we had more rookie running backs coming off the board. This is where you see the other guys that were very touted in this class, not J.K. Dobbins, as Heath brought up, but the other guys that have a chance to play right away. You see DeAndre Swift at 53, Cam Akers at 56, in the mix with some other running backs like James Conner, Devin Singletary, David Montgomery at the end of the round. And then you look again at the receivers that were taken here, Terry McLaurin and Stephon Diggs, DK Metcalf. So when you start to talk about these guys, Heath, good spot for Swift and Akers, or you feel the same way? Still too soon?
I'm hoping that this draft, because it happened right after the NFL draft, and all of these guys were really fresh in our minds, they just all went a little bit earlier than they're actually going to. But I think this is too early for these guys as well. Listen, DeAndre Swift is going to start in a battle with Kerryon Johnson, and he'll probably win that battle. But when Johnson's healthy, Johnson's been very good on a per carry basis, and I think he might be better on passing downs than Swift, at least in year one. Cam Akers is going to have to compete against two guys on the Rams. I would much, much rather have James Conner than either of those guys, and this is the part where everyone will disagree, but I'd rather have David Montgomery.
Does everybody disagree, or anybody taking David Montgomery over DeAndre Swift or Cam Akers? Just feel free to chime in.
I think I'll
Absolute
take
silence.
I'll take the rookies. I'll take the rookies over Montgomery, but I totally get it. One thing I just want to point out about the Swift pick is that Marone already had, I think, Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry. So I think if this is your number 3 running back, yeah, granted, you could be taking another position here and helping your team. I think it softens the blow a little bit. If DeAndre Swift is my number 2 running back and I'm taking him in round 5, I'm nervous about it. But I think if you want to just take a shot and say, I've got the running backs, let me take a guy who might be a league winner in the second half, I think it's better if you have that stability already with Cook and Henry.
Dave, you took DK Metcalf in this spot in round 5, and then the receivers that went after him, it kind of is where we start to see the drop-off. Stephon Diggs, AJ Green, you can talk about those guys. When you look at DK Metcalf and this round, maybe we can show the round again just to take a look at the receivers who were taken there. But after you took Metcalf, it feels like that's kind of where the receiver drop-off starts again. AJ Green was around earlier, but you got Stephon Diggs, DJ Chark, Devontae Parker. Is there kind of like a little separation between Metcalf in your mind and the rest of those guys?
In terms of upside, absolutely. And that's why I was tickled to get him in round 5. You saw it last year. He was actually consistent in PPR. He just wasn't explosive. And I think he can take that next step to be an amazing receiver almost every week. I think the Seattle offense is going to be on the field a lot. I think they're going to have to throw a lot. I think their defense is in real trouble. I think they're going to be in a lot of high-scoring games. And playing opposite Tyler Lockett isn't going to be a bad thing for DK Metcalf. And I think he might even be good enough to start beating some double teams. Obviously, if there's 2 guys on him all the time, Calvin Johnson style, no, I don't think he's good enough for that. But I think the targets will be there for him. And I think he does have top 12 potential in fantasy football. Maybe a little bit more non-PPR than PPR, but someone who can be an amazing stat producer for fantasy squads. Getting him in round 5, I felt like was a bargain.
I'm with you. I thought it was one of the better picks in the round. And as we talked about in our podcast today, DK Metcalf, one of 4 rookie wide receivers last year to have 100 targets or more since 2015. So Seattle obviously leaned on him quite a bit. Could be the case again this season, although maybe the addition of Greg Olsen sort of lowers that a little bit. I'd be surprised if that's the case. Metcalf and Tyler Lockett going to get a ton of targets, which is why we were very excited about both Seattle wide receivers going into 2020. As we look now to round 6, again, more of the second tier, in some cases third tier players coming off the board, and another rookie running back. No surprise it was me taking him. Keyshawn Vaughn going at 63 overall, the potential starter for Tampa Bay. I took him over Mark Ingram. Could be a little bit of a surprise. Adam, as we look at the picks here, would you have taken Vaughn or would you have taken Ingram there?
I would have taken Mark Ingram. I think Vaughn will catch more passes. I think Ingram will score more touchdowns. Maybe 8 more touchdowns. I don't know what Keyshawn Vaughn's going to get in that regard. Most likely scenario to me is week 1. Ronald Jones is getting 13 carries. Keyshawn Vaughn's getting something like 6. Vaughn's in on pass protection because Ronald Jones is bad at that. Or maybe Vaughn won't be good at that. Maybe it's Ogunbowale. I'm very unclear about what Vaughn's role is going to be. I think I would have taken Ronald Jones over Keyshawn Vaughn, so I definitely would have taken Mark Ingram over him. I would have taken Ronald Jones over Vaughn. So yes, Ingram is an easy one.
Okay, I could see you taking Ingram, but you would be silly to take Ronald Jones over Keyshawn Vaughn. That's just my opinion, and I'll leave it at that. Heath, when we look at Julian Edelman, Michael Gallup in this range here, we know the situation going on with those 2 guys. Edelman, terrible quarterback situation. At least that's what the expectation is. Gallup losing his at least stronghold on the number 2 wide receiver spot with the addition of CeeDee Lamb. These guys go in round 6. Is it the right spot for him? Too soon or just right?
I like this spot a lot for Michael Gallup. I don't really want to take Edelman here yet, and they might go get Andy Dalton or Cam Newton and make me feel better about it, but right now I'm pretty scared about this Patriots offense and what it's going to look like. As for Gallup, this team gave like 160 targets to Randall Cobb and Jason Witten last year, and Gallup still had the breakout that he did with over 120 targets. It's very easy for me to give 100 targets to CeeDee Lamb and still have Gallup as a top 30 wide receiver. I think he belongs actually possibly in the class with Devontae Parker and DJ Chark, who went around before. I like Gallup a lot right here.
Dave, you agree with that? Does Gallup belong in that same category with Chark and with Parker?
I'm kind of poo-pooing Gallup a little bit after CeeDee Lamb went there, and Lamb was my favorite receiver in as far as talent goes in the draft class, and I think he's going to fit pretty seamlessly into what Dallas does. I like Gallup as a player, and I think he's going to be a good number 2/3 receiver for the Cowboys. But I'm wondering how consistent he'll be. I'm wondering if those targets are still going to be there. He had over 110, if I recall. I'm wondering if he doesn't even touch that much going into 2020. I felt like this was a little too soon for Gallup.
Okay, so Gallup could be too soon, could be the right spot. Maybe in Heath's case, he would have taken him around earlier. So looking at these wide receivers, these running backs is what you're getting when you're talking about the guys in round 6. But when we come back, we're going to start to look at round 7 and beyond, and we get still a lot more talent at the wide receiver position. One of Dave's favorite guys, Jalen Reagor. Did he go too soon? We'll tell you coming up next here on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. We're breaking down our latest 12-team PPR mock draft, the first draft that we did following the NFL draft, and we had a fun conversation about the first 6 rounds, and now let's get into round 7 or later. And I know Dave's going to be excited about this one, because if you take a look at the list of the players selected in round 7, the final player coming off the board in this round is the receiver Dave would take as early as round 4, maybe round 3, maybe round 2, maybe he's taking him in round 1 at this point. He loves Jalen Reagor, but Reagor comes off at the end of the round in round 7. You see the list of receivers that went ahead of him: Marvin Jones, Deebo Samuel, Allen Lazard, maybe a little bit of a surprise, but as we know, the Packers did not add anything of significance to their receiving core. Brandon Cooks, tight ends with Evan Ingram and Tyler Higbee. A couple of running backs as well, with Raheem Mostert being the one taken at 79. All right, Dave, so is this a good spot for Jalen Reagor, or did he go too late?
It's a terrible spot for Reagor because he didn't go to my team. I was hoping that he would fall to me in round 8, where I would have gladly taken him. But R.J. White, who's a pretty smart football guy in his own right, took him at his last pick in round 7 and took him at the same time at the first pick in round 8. You'll see it was Jerry Jeudy. I love the fit of Reagor in this Philadelphia offense. Not only is he a terrific downfield threat, but he plays bigger than his 5'11 frame. He breaks tackles. He's a great route runner. He was my 3rd favorite receiver in the draft, and I could see him, laugh all you want, I think he can get to 120 targets, assuming that Alshon Jeffrey is either limited to start the year or is not ready to start the year. And I really don't think Alshon Jeffrey is a major threat to his workload anyway. Now, it's contingent on a couple of things like training camp being there, Carson Wentz being able to connect with Reagor right away. But I love the fact that he fell into Philadelphia's lap late in round 1. I'm glad that they took him, and I think he's got potential to be the best rookie receiver in the draft class in 2020.
I'm making Heath and Dave argue a lot today. So, Heath, tell Dave why it was too soon, and would you have taken Reagor even ahead of Jeudy or Lamb, who went in round 8?
I would not have taken him ahead of Jeudy or Lamb or about 24 other wide receivers that went in the next 4 rounds. I'm not taking Jalen Reagor before round 11. Maybe that will change if they actually find some way to get out from under Alshon Jeffrey's contract, if Deshaun Jackson announces his retirement, if we get some indication at the beginning of camp that Jalen Reagor is looking like the number 1 receiver. I think it's important to remember that if he wins this battle amongst the 17 wide receivers, including Marquise Goodwin, they have competing against him at camp, he's competing to be number 2 at best in terms of targets in this offense, and really probably more like number 3 because the running backs will get a bigger share than any one wide receiver if Doug Peterson history is any indicator. The last 2 seasons, the Eagles have been rock bottom in the NFL with fewer than 50% of their targets going to wide receivers. I don't expect a rookie to go in there and get 120 in year 1.
All right, so we had the Miles Sanders conversation, the Juju Smith-Schuster conversation. Adam, I've asked you to break the tie both times. One side for Dave, one side for Heath. Break the tie again. Too soon for Jalen Reagor, or is this the right area for him, round 7, round 8?
I do not think it's too soon. He's like my 5th or 6th ranked rookie wide receiver, but as we discussed this morning on our podcast, it's a really really tough group to rank, and a lot of guys could finish number 1. As long as the rookie wide receivers go after Brandon Cooks, I'm going to be okay with it. And they did. Cooks went 2 picks before Jalen Reagor. I don't think 120 targets is happening unless Zach Ertz gets hurt. But 100 targets could happen, and Jamie already mentioned on this show, 100 targets for a rookie wide receiver is rare. So that would give him a great chance to be the best rookie wide receiver. I know they don't throw a lot to their wide receivers, but there's a reason for that. Their wide receivers either weren't good or weren't healthy. Their wide receivers were among the worst in the NFL last year when Alshon Jeffrey was out. So now they've obviously upgraded the situation. Hopefully they're healthy. They're going to throw a lot more to their wide receivers than they did each of the last 2 seasons, in my opinion. I think this is perfectly fine. I don't think he'll get 120 targets. He doesn't need 120 targets to be the last pick of round 7 in a 12-team league.
The only way I would take Reagor in this spot is if we do find out that Jeffrey's going to miss significant time, then I think his stock is certainly on the rise. But as of now, if Jeffrey's going to be there for the Eagles, I think this is just a little bit too soon for Reagor. I would rather have the other guys that went in round 8 in terms of Judy and Lamb ahead of them, because I do think they're in slightly similar situations and maybe even better, because at least you know what their playing time most certainly is going to be. But we'll find out what Jeffrey's status is, hopefully, by the time we get to training camp. Let's go now to round 8, and we see a lot of running backs that have lost some value coming out of the NFL draft because of the situations that they're dealing with. So we have Damian Williams off the board here. We have Ronald Jones off the board here. We have Marlon Mack off the board here. So Adam, when you look at these guys, could they end up being steals? Because while we may be overvaluing the rookies, these guys could still be the starters and maybe hold on to the job for a few weeks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would take these running backs, these veteran running backs, over the rookie wide receivers. I really like Darius Geis. Now, see, remember we were talking about Jonathan Taylor. When would you take Jonathan Taylor if I told you that he was going to be great in the second half of the season, but you weren't going to get much in the first half? That's how I feel about Darius Geis. I love Darius Geis here in round 8. This was my pick, but he's a guy that I'm targeting. I still think Damian Williams has a role. In fact, if you could somehow pair Williams and Geis, you might have a good running back in the first half with Damian Williams, then a great one in the second half with Darius Geis. Yeah, Marlon Mack, I think, is going to lead the team in carries. And I think he's going to score more touchdowns than any other running back. So I think these are great picks, really good value, and I would take them over the rookie wide receivers.
Dave, is this too soon for J.K. Dobbins, though, knowing that Mark Ingram most likely going to lead the team in touches, carries? We talked about this, that Dobbins more better suited for 2021 than he is for 2020. Good spot, or just a little bit too soon for him?
No, he should have gone in the double-digit rounds. He's someone that I don't think you can look at and say that's a fantasy starter or that's a flex option for my fantasy team. At best for 2020, he's the handcuff to Mark Ingram. And I took Mark Ingram in round 6, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to get J.K. Dobbins, I figure around 10. And I felt like that was reaching for Dobbins a little bit. But that was my plan, was to make him my running back in round 10. He went way before. There's no questioning the talent. He's a fantastic talent, and in time, he will be outstanding for the Ravens in that offense. But for this year, I don't see him being worth this pick at all.
The one thing that we did see, there was a report from ESPN Baltimore that Dobbins, by the end of the season, could be taking Mark Ingram off the field. So we'll see how that unfolds. Maybe we have a situation like we did see in Philadelphia, although it could take an injury to Mark Ingram for that to happen for Dobbins. But Ingram certainly going to be on notice as a guy who turns 31 comparatively to Dobbins, who is 21. So could be one of those gambles that you take with the hope that Dobbins is playing significant touches by the end of the season. Let's go to round 9 in a very similar conversation as we take a look at the players who were selected in this round. You got a couple running backs who losing their job potentially in Kerryon Johnson. And Darrell Henderson never had the job, but he was expected maybe to take over for Todd Gurley. He still could, but the addition of Cam Akers probably not going to make that happen. Keith, same question to you. Are these just good values for guys like Kerryon and Darrell Henderson, knowing that they could be the starters, at least early in the year?
Yeah, I think Kerryon especially, this is about the right spot to take him, and it has a good chance to start week 1. And I do think even if Swift gets a decent-sized role, Kerryon's more likely to be on the field on third down for at least as long as he's healthy. I would prefer to wait a round or two on Darrell Henderson. This guy couldn't beat out Malcolm Brown last year. I think it's most likely, if we had a depth chart for the Rams running backs, week 1 of the preseason, it's going to be Malcolm Brown up top, and Henderson's going to be second, and then Akers is going to be third. Akers is going to pass Henderson at some point, most likely. So Henderson's just hoping that he can finally pass Malcolm Brown. He's a double-digit round pick. There's still upside there, but there's absolutely no security.
Jordan Howard was also selected in round 9. Matt Breida went 2 rounds earlier. Adam, give me the breakdown of the Dolphins running backs, and is that how you would see it going? Breida in the round 7 range, Howard more in the round 9 range.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I would also like to say, slightly off subject, that James White in round 9 was an excellent pick by Heath Cummings. If you want to wait on running back in PPR, James White is a really good one. I do not have any interest in Jordan Howard in a PPR league. I could see you taking him ahead of Matt Breida in a non-PPR league. This is another situation where I think you draft Breida knowing you're not going to get great results out of him immediately, most likely. You're going to have to wait. But he's just a better player than Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard is just a plotter. He very, very rarely makes a big play. He's not going to catch more than 25 passes. Breida is the upside. He deserves to go ahead of Jordan Howard, and I think round 7 for Breida, round 9 for Howard makes sense. For me, it would be more like round 10 for Jordan Howard or round never for Jordan Howard in a PPR league. I'm just not interested in him.
Let's move on now to round 10, and we see some more rookie wide receivers coming off the board in this range, and could be guys that may be by the end of the season, as we saw last year, because Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, these guys were not drafted with the same pedigree as N'Keal Harry and Marquise Brown. They were better. We know that clearly there was 6 wide receivers drafted in the first round of this NFL draft, and some of the guys taken in round 2 or later could be better. Speaking specifically of guys like Shenault at 110 and Denzel Mims at 117, mixed in with some other receivers, Emmanuel Sanders, Sterling Shepard, Sammy Watkins, Darius Slayton, and whatnot. So, Adam, when you look at these other guys, Mims and Shenault, just good value for guys that could be significant contributors to their respective teams?
I think really good. I mean, Ben Gretsch has made such good points about Laviska Shenault and the role he could play, the way he would complement DJ Chark. Chark would go downfield and Shenault would stay underneath, and that team might have to throw a lot. I think it's a really good pick for Shenault. We all like the opportunity for Denzel Mims, maybe discounting Rashad Perryman a little bit. I mean, Perryman's really never been healthy, and when he finally got his chance last year with the Bucs, he was great. But we all expect Mims to be the guy as the number 1 outside receiver. Interestingly enough, Perryman went just 2 picks later. These are two of my favorite picks so far in the draft. Shenault in round 10, Mims in round 10. When you're talking about 2 rounds separating them and the guys like CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Reagor and Jerry Jeudy, who are better players but probably don't have the same type of opportunity. Love these values, Jamie. Love them.
Yep, 2 very good landing spots and 2 talented wide receivers that could make an impact right away, although maybe it'd be nice to see if Shenault had a better quarterback. Sorry, just taking a shot at Heath there. Dave, you took Darius Slayton in this round, in round 10. We know the Giants wide receiver core is a little bit of a mystery, just not trying to know who's going to be the lead target getter, who's going to be the best player of the trio of Slayton, Sterling Shepard, and Golden Tate. Why Slayton in PPR over Shepard?
Because I think he's got the most upside of the whole group. And you look at Jason Garrett's track record, he likes to throw downfield when he's actually calling plays. It's been a long time since he's done it. And I know that the edict from Joe Judge will probably be, let's conservatively play offense, let's run the football. But they're going to have to take some downfield shots too. Their defense isn't going to keep them in a ton of games. And Slayton's the best down the field receiver that they have. Shepard's great, and he could certainly lead the team in targets and catches. But I think Slayton's the one that's got the most upside to give you high leverage fantasy points based on the deep ball, based on touchdowns. His size is a factor in the red zone. I think there's a couple of different ways where Slayton can help you win, and I was very happy to take him at this point in the draft.
Heath, I just need 3 names. Rank the 3 Giants receivers in PPR: Slayton, Shepard, Tate.
Shepard, Tate, Slayton.
Okay, so there's another version of how the Giants wide receivers can go. We'll see how they end up at the end of the year, and we'll tell you if any of the other guys ended up our teams. Dave already took Darius Slayton. We'll take a look at our teams when we come up next here on Fantasy Football Today. Tell you about a guy who probably got a lot of his favorite options: Adam Thielen, T.Y. Hilton, Russell Wilson. Happy Adam Mazer coming up next here on CBS Sports HQ. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. We're breaking down our latest 12-team PPR mock draft. We told you about the first 10 rounds, and now let's take a look at our teams as we take a look at what Adam Mazer did. I know he loves this squad. He absolutely loves this team. It's the best team I think he's ever drafted in the history of playing fantasy football. Adam, I want to ask you about Two players that you took at the bottom there, Tony Pollard and Chase Edmonds. You took Ezekiel Elliott and Kenyon Drake. Is there a priority to handcuff those two running backs in particular just because they're so good in the offenses that they're playing in?
Yeah, I think both guys, especially Edmonds, would be really, really good if he got put in that role, and I think Pollard would be very good, not quite as good as Edmonds in this format. Really? I mean, my team is so good, and you're going to ask me about my handcuffs? Come on, man. I got Kenyon Drake 22nd overall. To me, he's a borderline top 12 player. T.Y. Hilton and Adam Thielen are underrated, especially Thielen. I don't know. If I could do it again, I'm not sure I'd take both of them because they're both a little bit risky. But I got value all over the board, Jamie. So one of my best teams, and I've got handcuffs for my running backs, and I've got my quarterback 3.5 because I'm not quite sure if Wilson's going to be 3 or 4 for me when it's all said and done. But I love it. I'm very happy with it.
It's the best work you've ever done. Let's take a look now at Dave's team and another couple of reserve running backs that we're looking at here, Dave, just because I'm curious about them in terms of A.J. Dillon and Antonio Gibson. Dillon, we know, is going to make things uncomfortable for Aaron Jones, and Gibson was kind of a wild card for Washington that has a ton of running backs. How are you feeling about those two guys?
I actually feel pretty good about taking shots on them in the double-digit rounds. Dillon, for example, there's got to be a reason for why Green Bay had him other than, well, we need a third running back. Well, you could have found a third running back as an undrafted free agent, but they instead spent the draft capital that they did on A.J. Dillon, and I have a feeling he's going to matter a lot more than anybody's giving him credit for. I think if you got him in round 9, it would feel a little too soon right now, but he could be one of the running backs that we're talking about making a big impact in the second half of the season. And Antonio Gibson reminded me of a poor man's Christian McCaffrey coming out. Great pass catcher out of the backfield, not necessarily a sure thing as a ball carrier. And look at who the new Panthers head coach and offensive play caller are. Former Panthers. So we know Adrian Peterson's old, Darius Geis can't stay healthy, Peyton Barber's just a guy. Who says Antonio Gibson can't become a thing in Washington? And in a PPR league, that might make him a James White type where he gets you 10 PPR points per week.
Good swing for the defensive player to take at the end of your draft. Heath, I ask this question to athletes a lot when I talk to them about projecting for the season. I want to ask this to you about A.J. Green. At the end of the year, what are we going to be saying about A.J. Green from the 2020 season?
He's not quite his old self, but at least he stayed healthy this year. Yeah, I think he's a solid number 2 wide receiver in this offense. I would expect the split between he and Tyler Boyd is a little bit closer than it was the last time that we saw Green. They can be a nice duo for Joe Burrow. Green, I would expect, will improve as the season goes on, as will Burrow, who may get off to a bit of a slow start. But mostly with this team, it made me so happy that I took a tight end in the first 5 rounds because I would not want to be looking at Noah Fant or Jared Cook as my starting tight end.
Yes, could be a little bit troubling for those tight ends taking a shot at both Dave and Adam's teams there and the tight ends that they have on their rosters. For me, I did something that I know Adam Azer likes. It's the friendship strategy. And when we look at my team, with my 3rd and 4th wide receivers, I took the 2 guys for the Texans. I took Brandon Cooks in round 7 and Will Fuller in round 8. And we know those guys have a hard time staying healthy. But if they are healthy, we had a fun conversation about this on our podcast. We're talking about both these guys playing, let's say, 13 plus games. You've seen Cooks do it. Fuller, if he does ever do it, especially with DeAndre Hopkins now gone, those guys could be awesome. Now, it's obviously going to be frustrating trying to figure out which is the better one on a week-to-week basis if they just continue to do what they do. But you'd like to have that problem if they're both the top options for Deshaun Watson. So never a bad idea if you can marry 2 players together that have the success that they potentially could have. But as we talked about with my team, I took a lot of chances on some rookies. Edwards-Helaire in round 2, Keyshawn Vaughn in round 6. We saw Swift and Akers go in round 5, Jonathan Taylor go in round 4. This is the feeling out process that we're going through with a lot of these rookie running backs, rookies overall. Jalen Reagor in round 7, Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb in round 8, Henry Ruggs in round 8 as well. So we're going to get through this as we continue to take a look at the new additions following the NFL draft. This was our first mock draft, so a lot more mock drafts to come. We actually have one later today as well because we're going to start planning for our magazine. So mock drafts are coming. Hope you guys are ready. We're going to break it down on our Fantasy Football Today podcast. You can get your podcast wherever they're found, and we are the best in the business at giving you all the fantasy advice that you need to help you dominate your fantasy leagues. When we come back for the rest of the week, we're going to take a look at some dynasty values. We're also going to take a look at some running backs as well. So a lot of fun FFT coming up for you here on CBS Sports HQ. Thanks for watching today. For Keith, for Adam, for Dave, I'm James. Want more of the Fantasy Football Today podcast and nonstop year-round fantasy advice? It's simple. Hit the subscribe button and hang with us all throughout the year.